Hi, I'm Kate Bailey. I'm a coach, an author, and a sober mama. And this is Love Sober, the podcast for the sober and sober curious.
You know who made it.
Hi, and welcome back. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome a fantastic guest. I'm having a bit of a fangirl moment. It's the fabulous Laura McKowen, who's the author of We Are the Luckiest. And she's got a new book out. And if you're listening in from the States, it's this week when this episode will drop. It's this week. And it's called Push Off From Here. 9 universal truths to get you through sobriety and everything else. And oh man, when I read this over the last couple of weeks, and I can just say that those truths did drop with me. It was like the shoe dropping, like I recognized and resonated with them. As a woman in recovery, as someone been on the sober path for a few years, I was like, yeah, there's quite a few, but we're going to dive into that.
Okay,
so
great.
we usually start with a check-in, just to land and say, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're recording this exactly almost 2 weeks out from the release of the book, so nerves are high.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's exciting but stressful. But overall, I'm doing great. Like I just told you, I'm in Mexico right now, so recording from a hotel room. Looking at the beautiful ocean, I have nothing to complain about.
I love the thought of that. So I'm in rainy, just sort of, have you ever been to the UK?
I have. Just to
Okay.
London. I'm so basic.
It's a great city. I think if you're going to go anywhere in the UK, that's a good place to go. But I mean, have you, the winter in the UK is just kind of piss miserable, I have to say. It really is, right?
Yeah.
So
well, I live in Boston, which is the same. So I think I understand what it's like. Yes.
Yeah, trying to claw our way just out of the ends of winter here and just going, sort of that sort of thing. But, I'm really delighted to be talking to you. So that's kind of, giving me some sunshine in my day. So thanks again.
Likewise.
Yeah. So I really want to dive into push off from here. Before we do, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about what brought you to the decision to be alcohol free and enter recovery?
Sure. I have been sober now for 8.5 years, about. I got sober in 2014. And for me, it was a matter of really life or death at the time when I finally stopped. I had suffered a lot of consequences as a result of my drinking. My daughter was 4 years old, so I was a relatively new mom. And what really brought me into recovery, into facing the fact that I had a problem with alcohol, was an incident involving her where I put her in extreme danger by leaving her alone overnight because I was blacked out. And that really woke me up to the fact that anything could happen. I had still had a lot of denial at that point about how bad it really was, and that told me how bad it really was. So I started to try to get sober around 2013 and finally did. Over a year later, like it is for many people. It wasn't an instant thing. It was a learning process. I did it very reluctantly. I didn't want to get sober. I wanted to not keep drinking as I had, because that was terrible and miserable, but I wanted to find some other way than to have to get sober completely. So yeah, since then, everything is different. Every single thing is different. And I was not always an author. I had a whole career before this in marketing and advertising. But once I got sober, I started to write about what was going on. And I had long wanted and aspired to be an author, but that dream felt very far away. When I got sober, I was in my late 30s. So I well into a career, 15 years. And I thought that dream was basically over. And what I have learned is that in sobriety, just about anything is possible. And I did switch careers. As you said, I published a book in 2020. And there's a long in-between process in there, of course. But that's what brought me here. And I never thought I would be writing about and talking about sobriety as like my main topic. I never thought that would be the thing, but it was. I had and still have so much to say about it, as do you. You know, I had a podcast, one of the first podcasts in the US as well. I know you're the first in the UK to talk about this, and you know, that is one of many things that I started to do that I really just wanted to talk about what this thing is and what I was going through, and in a different way than I had heard it being talked about, you know, a primarily 12-step way, a primarily secretive way, anonymous way, masculine way. And so that's the short version.
Yeah, thank you for telling us about that. You know, there's the layers of the onion, and there's the, I don't know, the when we get sober, and then there's that next bit, and there's the habit change. It's just the hard graft of like, oh, you know, this just feels like really hard graft, and then we get to some of the good stuff. I love the fact that you called it the 9 essential truths to get you through sobriety and other things, because what we put it down, you know, we get rid of the drink and we do that, you know, that sort of, we break up with it, and then here we are. Take us through, if you will, these 9 essential truths as you have discovered them to be.
Sure. So a quick background of how these came to be, because I think this is interesting and important, is they were a response to a letter I received from a woman back in 2016 who was wondering what to say to her sister who was struggling with alcohol. And as many or most or all people are, you know, how they feel when someone they love is struggling, she was angry and sad and confused and scared and all of those things that she was afraid of losing, of pushing on her sister too much and losing her. And so she asked me what I would have wanted to hear. And I wrote her a long letter, and at the end there are these points. And so the points are: 1, it is not your fault. 2, it is your responsibility. 3, it is unfair that this is your thing. 4, this is your thing. 5, this will never stop being your thing until you face it. 6, you can't do it alone. 7, only you can do it. 8, you are loved. And 9, we will never stop reminding you of these things. And so that's where they came from. And, you know, then over time, it became clear people really attached to these points and applied them to many other things besides alcohol. But it became clear, even I had questions about what they actually meant. And so that's what the book is about.
Yeah. And I love it. You know, when I read them, and I read them again, so I read them and I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's not your fault, but it's just, I understand that. And then I couldn't, and then it was like an earworm. It kind of got into me, right? That's a really horrible way of describing it. But I was like, okay, yeah. And then I was like, okay, this is the power of the and. It is not your fault, and it's your responsibility. It's holding these complex, maybe what on the surface maybe when we're thrashing about seem like they're opposing. And it's like the power being in the and the compassion, right? So this is like the next thing. So this is the one that spoke to me so much at the moment in my life. It is unfair that this is your thing, right? And I was like, damn, yeah. And then there's that compassion, and I was like, this is your thing. And I was like, oh yeah, man, it is.
I know. That's on purpose, obviously, you know, because we need both.
Yes,
we need both, and it's complicated. The whole
Yes.
thing is very complicated. Change is complicated of any kind.
Mm.
And to hold both the fact that it is not your fault. So much
Yeah.
is not our fault.
Yeah.
And but it is still your responsibility.
Yeah.
Is I think a lot of what we get in self-help, or even some spiritual teachings that have been, distilled down to something that they were not meant to be, is this sort of
Mm.
hard-nosed, either one or the other,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're, if you're writing, say, if you're writing an article or you're asked to talk about a subject, you're almost asked to pick the one thing and go on that,
Hmm.
aren't you? So we do have this, yeah, kind of tendency to polarize, for other
Hmm.
people's convenience and for the medium's convenience of certain mediums.
Yes.
So I love that. I love the sort of the power of the end. Can you elaborate on each one and then the kind of connection between its sort of opposite?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
So the number one, it's not your fault. So for many people, including myself, this is a very hard one to swallow, because we, at least when it comes to sobriety, because we are told and we believe that we've done this to ourselves. This is a matter of will or loss of control. Why couldn't we just manage our alcohol? And there are many reasons why this is not our fault. Alcohol culture, uh, the extraordinary impact of that culture and marketing,
Yeah.
which is of course part of culture. But when it comes to alcohol, you can't overstate that, because it's this very specific thing in our culture that we love and we protect, and we
Yeah.
and we don't want to talk about it also, as it's like off limits, right? We're all in this sort of unspoken agreement that we're going to protect it and love it and
Yeah.
have it everywhere, and unless you have a problem,
Yeah.
and then you need to go away and deal with it, right?
Which is terrifying. That fear when we're early sober, we're thinking about getting sober, that fear of kind of disconnection that we're kind of told, in the advertising, the marketing, and the cultural narrative is
Yeah.
terrifying. And it
Yeah.
can't be called out enough, as far as I'm
No, it
concerned.
can't.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I spend a lot of time on that in the
Yeah.
book, because I really want people to understand that this isn't, many people tried to tell me that this wasn't my fault early on, and I couldn't hear it. It felt very victim-y to me to say this isn't my fault. It took me a while to see things clearly, and to realize the impact that the culture had on me, to realize the impact that, I mean, the other piece is alcohol. It is a very powerful drug.
Yeah.
It is an addictive drug. And so to say that it's people's fault that they get addicted to it is crazy,
Yeah.
right? And so all those things and more that I won't go deep into,
Mm.
speak to the fact that this is not your fault. It's also, some people are prone to addiction. They just are. Uh, I definitely was one of those people. Uh, and is that my fault? Is it my fault if I got sick in any other way? No.
Yeah.
But with this, we definitely point the finger at the person. So it's not your fault. The counter point, it is your responsibility. Uh, this was the hardest chapter to write, because
I
it's
know.
it's such a big meta topic. It's very hard to talk about personal responsibility without sounding like everything is up to the individual,
Mm.
and that if by the magic powers of their mind or the law of attraction or their mindset or whatever, they can just pull themselves up from their bootstraps and change their lives in any way. That's not obviously the case. This is more focused on the fact that at the end of the day, the space where we do have any freedom is in that choice, the choices that we do have, right?
Yeah.
There are some choices we don't have, but there are always choices that we do have. And without the personal responsibility element, we are only victims. So it is your responsibility. Yeah. It is a very hard pill to swallow because it's so unfair, because it's, because of the culture we live in, that only we can ultimately make this happen.
Yeah.
No one was going to watch me every second of every day.
Yeah. That bit of personal responsibility, if that's our zone of influence, that is our personal power, that is the moment of agency, then we got, that's a beautiful thing as well, so it's almost like, this is not me telling you off. This is kind of like Irene Cara going, fame costs, and this is where you have to start paying in sweat, but she does it because she loves them, sort of thing.
Yes.
She wants them to do well.
Yes. But yeah, well, I say in the book, it is the worst best news.
Yeah.
The message of that it is your responsibility, because no one is coming to save you, sucks. And no one is coming to save you, so you
it almost gives you permission, right, as well, though. That's almost that, because there's that, I do think we float around in that kind of trance of things just happen. We don't it's that precious space that if we can access it, and that is one of the most beautiful things for me about shoving alcohol out and saying no, is that fundamental boundary of self-love, is that oh, okay, I can hear what I've got to play with now. I hear what I've got some agency over. Yes. So it's almost like that leap of faith, isn't it, though? If we haven't quite put the bottle down at that point, that's a hard one to, like you said, it's a hard pill to swallow, that one.
It is. And it's where all of our freedom is too, as you've been saying.
Yeah.
So point 3, this was my favorite one to write about, because saying it's unfair that this is your thing, we all feel that, but I had to ask myself, what does that really mean? Because none of us actually expects things to be fair.
Yeah.
We want them to be, but none of us actually believes that they are. And so what I learned that I meant by that was, we want someone to witness us in our grief, in our sorrow. We want someone to say, I see you and I hear you, and what you feel is real.
Yeah.
And so it's unfair that this is your thing, is more about being seen and allowing ourselves, and the need to be seen in our suffering, and that this is suffering. We don't, part of what I get into in this chapter is that there's so much grief in losing drinking, and we don't really, this is one of those areas where we don't allow people, we don't believe they should feel grief over something because they've done it to themselves. Why would you feel grief about something that's obviously not good for you, that's hurting your life? And so we have all these internalized and unspoken beliefs about who's allowed to feel grief about things, and for what. And addiction is, or even just, problematic alcohol use is not one of those things we let people feel grief for. And this was really about the need to feel witnessed in our sorrow.
And I felt that when I read it, and the way I responded to it was that this is very compassionate. This was like almost giving permission. So my particular thing that I applied that to at the moment is not sobriety itself. It's about being successful enough in my career. And one of the reasons, the whole thing about things not being a level playing field, for whatever reason, I've got really complex family situation going on, kids with neurodiverse needs, and lots of different things, lots of different elements, which means that you can really beat up on yourself. And this compassion, and I was like, man, this really sucks that I can't go to this conference and this one and this one and this one, because actually my family needs me. And I went, it's not this is not my, it's not fair. And my inner teenager was like, it's not fair. And it was like, oh, as soon as that is voiced, and the same thing with alcohol, it's like, as soon as that you're allowed to say it, it's like, oh, okay. Like you said, it's about the witnessing, it's about the compassion. And I really felt like that. I felt it
good.
when you wrote it and I read it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it does something to us. We stay very trapped in our shame and our suffering when we don't feel like how we feel is valid,
Yeah.
And then number 4 is, this is your thing. Wait, yes. Like,
yes, it is.
This
it is
your thing. And just that, it's just straight up acceptance that we have to have, like, this, it's not fair and it sucks and all of those things are true, and it is my thing.
Yeah.
Admitting that alcohol was my thing was very hard, and it is just acceptance. That's what this chapter is all about.
Freeing as well. It's like, you remind me when you're saying that, it's almost like a parental voice. It's like, sweetheart, I know it's not fair, but that's how it is. And it's like, okay, that feels safe, because it's not
reality.
Permission, it's reality, it's real, it's acknowledging all the bits of it, but it still is. And so we've just kind of got to get behind that one. Love.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, it's reality. And reality, the truth is always, it always is freeing, even if it feels terrible. We can stand on it, and we know it in our bodies.
Yeah, we
right?
do. Yeah.
So, and then, this will never stop being your thing. Number 5, this will never stop being your thing until you face it, is the action part. Knowing this is your thing is one thing, and then doing something about it. Like, this is a process that you have to participate in. And so it will never stop being your thing until you face it. I talk about how you actually go about facing it. And this is the most, I would say, practical chapter. There's 5 pillars of sobriety that I've identified, and many, many things that you can do to actually practice those in your life.
Take us through those.
Yes. The 5 practices, I should have these memorized, but I'll try. Okay. Acceptance. I want to do them in order. Acceptance, connection, honesty, embodiment, and service.
Yeah.
So acceptance, I talk a lot about both self-acceptance, which is a huge piece, and other acceptance, everything else that isn't you, the world around you, and all the other things you can't control. Connection is about the absolute need for connection, and that we don't heal in isolation. We aren't able to face this as our thing on our own. We need fellow travelers. We need, as I call them in the book, noodles, which is the term that's used in my community. We just need people who understand our experience exactly. Just like when you're a parent, it would be very difficult to survive parenthood without ever talking to other parents. So it's an encouragement to really reach for those people and establish connections in sobriety. Then there is honesty, which is, it is absolutely impossible to, I think, get sober, even to quit drinking, but certainly to recover and have any sort of freedom in sobriety without honesty. That is sort of the baseline.
Yeah.
That's actually how I meurse sobriety for myself now. Am I being honest with myself and others? And if I'm not, I need to be on to that. I'm not doing so well.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then embodiment, which is a piece that is missing from a lot of programs, and a piece that is so critical. Because embodiment it includes the conversation around the actual body. And what that means is considering trauma, considering when we embody something, we actually experience it, and we know it in a level beyond our intellect, right?
Yeah.
And so it embodiment practices involve what I really talk about here is trauma as part of the addiction equation for almost everybody, and how that has to be addressed through more than talking. It has to involve a somatic experience of the body. And then the last one is service, which is being in service of others. This to me is so critical, and it's one of the things that AA got absolutely right, is when we are in service of others, which is not as complicated and big as we think it is, which is one of the things I talk about, just sharing yourself, being honest is of service.
Yeah.
Being honest to the people around you, being honest with in a meeting with others, talking about your experience with alcohol honestly to someone who might be struggling is an act of service.
Yeah.
There are many other much smaller acts of service. You know, we often think they have to be grand sweeping gestures, like you start a nonprofit or you raise thousands and thousands of dollars. Yes, that can be service, but being of service is really making yourself available to people who are traveling this road with you. Those are the 5 things in that
I love
chapter.
that. Yeah, it makes so much sense to me. And I definitely feel like one of those, thank goodness, the sort of conversations around trauma have been widening and widening and widening. I do feel like, I don't think it's just my algorithms. I think it's like, you know, and this and the need for, and I think also COVID and pandemic, when we couldn't be together, and the realization we need to be heart to heart with people, we needed our hugs, right?
Yes.
And that somatic piece is so, well, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? It's like,
it does.
We haven't been talking about this for
We're
thousands of
we
years.
live in a we are animals, and social animals, and animals with needs, and our bodies.
The trauma piece, that's the thing about the need to explicitly state it and work with it, is because of the dysregulation, it can be so uncomfortable to drop in and somatically experience. And that's often why we drank, or that's at that point, a dreadful discomfort of sitting in my own skin. Oh, I know what will numb that for 5 minutes or whatever. So that for me is key in the way we experience the world, for sure.
Same.
Same.
Yes, 6. You can't do it alone. And this just is all about why we can't do it alone. And this was the hardest thing for me to accept. It's still a very hard thing for me to accept. I still want to do everything alone. You know, in our culture in the West, especially, we, prize individualism, and it makes sense that we feel this way, and that any failure that we have is a failure of the individual, and that we have to figure it out alone. And for me, and for just about everyone else I know, sobriety is just one of those mountains or those rivers that's too hard to cross on your own. You can't. So this normalizes that. And then only you can do it is back again to that, almost the same as it is your responsibility, but a bit different. This, I want to speak more to the only you can do your life. Only you can fulfill the role that you have in the bigger scheme of things. And that goes well beyond not drinking. And then 8, you are loved. I talk about the power of love and how love comes to us and changes us, and why we need it. Because it's not as obvious as we think. We are very hard to, it's very hard to accept this, that we are loved, especially when we're in a dark place of addiction. And then the last is number 9, is we will never stop reminding you of these things, because this is a process, right? And we need to hear these things over and over and over again. It's not a light switch that we turn on and suddenly we're better and sober. This is an invitation that never closes.
Yeah. And when I'm thinking about that, this never stop reminding you of this thing. This is reminding me, I'm like having a moment of drawing a spiral on my notepad, because it feels to me like we just spiral, don't we? We spiral round and round. And then there's another thing. And then there's this thing where okay, that's something I haven't encountered before. And before I know it, I'm trying to do it on my own and I'm all cross with myself because I can't do it. And
Yes.
then, yeah, you're loved. You can't do it on your own. And then I'll never stop. And then it's like that lovely, lovely kind of base to return,
Yes.
which is beautiful and true, which I think these are essential truths. I really do.
I do
Um,
too.
yeah. I don't know. Thank you for writing them down and having the clarity to put them into bullet points. That's a
Yes.
skill, the skill of
Thanks some
brevity.
the previous version of myself that wrote those and then had to figure out later what they actually meant.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I know that you've talked about, in the book, the kind of, there's the boundaries. I was looking in the footnotes behind and I was like, yeah, you got the Melissa Urban book, there's the Ned, yeah, there's that. And I was like, yeah, they're back there on
They're
the
all on your
bookshelves.
bookshelf.
Yeah, we've
Yes.
been reading the same book, so we're on this, similar paths here. You see what these, I love the fact that even that these are like, it's like a spine going through and you can go off onto different tangents and go as deep as you like on each one of them, but then you come back to that kind of central channel again. So I think this is going to be such a useful book for people.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. And I did include a lot of questions because I'm not a clinician, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a professional researcher, I'm not a scientist. I don't have all the answers, but I do know how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And I believe that we do have the answers in there. If we have the willingness to ask questions, to talk, to share, to speak honestly. And so there are a lot of questions for
What are
people to
your
use.
what would you say your if you could pick your top 3 questions?
The questions about shame in there, which are many, are often the most revealing and important. Rather than I suppose say specific ones. I will say one specific one. This idea of doing it alone in chapter 6. I ask basically, are you trying to go it alone? Why? And how is that working? Even just answering that can be so revealing because often what comes up is all these ideas you have about what it means to need help. And to question, you can then question those ideas. Because if in one of the questions or prompts, I tell folks to consider someone they love unconditionally and easily and dearly, a child or a pet or a partner, and to ask themselves if that person or being came to them hurting and so wrapped up in shame the way that they are, what would they say to them? And it's so easy to imagine the compassion and the love that we would offer them. And if that is in you, we think, well, that's for them, I don't deserve it. But that's not true, of course. And if that's in you, to offer that to them, it's in you to offer it to yourself as well.
And I feel like if you have that, like I was talking to this, I've got a fantastic yoga studio in the next town who they're like they're my family.
Yes.
And so Bryony and Silas, I will give you a shout out because I know you're listening to this at some point. But so Silas said that he is quite hard on himself, but he said if he can do that, he literally grabs it and turns it inwards as soon as he can. like he'll get, if he's a bit down on himself, he'll think about, they've got a lovely dog called Clover who's like the Marilyn Monroe of dogs, and you couldn't possibly be ever cross with Clover because she's the goddess of light,
she's perfect,
light,
right?
She's perfect. So you look at her feeling like she might have done something wrong and you would just melt, and then grab the melty and then shove the melty back at yourself, and you get that sort of sense of, there's that visceral sense, that somatic sense of, okay, I might not have joined up all the dots, but I feel it. I feel what possibility it is to expand in this
Yes.
moment, not contract in this moment, not to turn
I love
away.
that. Grab the melty.
Grab the melty. That's like
That's what you should title
PhD.
this episode. Grab the melty.
Okay. Yeah. Just today. So not in the whole thing, but from your heart today, what would be
Mhm.
your biggest kind of tip to someone who is struggling right now to get sober and in that awful push-pull space?
You have to say something
Mm.
to someone. You have to. It's it's too big to hold. Uh, if opening your mouth is too hard, write it down first. That can be extraordinarily difficult on its own. So I just want to acknowledge how scary that can be, but you have to open your mouth. You have to get it outside of your body.
Mm.
And my experience is that once we start to do that, once we say the first true thing about what's going on with us, the next breadcrumb appears and we gain this. Yes, it's vulnerable, but we gain this flash of courage in that moment, and so many other things. So you have to open your mouth. You have to do it.
Mm. Thank you. I just want to, that moved me then. I just want to sort of land with that. And I kind of, yeah, feel back to the first night that it was my first, yeah, the first time I kind of thought I might be able to do this was I logged on at 3 a.m. in the morning, Googling, am I an alcoholic again? And I found Soberistas. And this is
Yeah.
before social media, the whole social media thing. And I blogged. So I wrote a very short piece, a little bit of a letter just saying, I don't know if anyone's even out there or listening, but this is how I'm feeling and I don't know if I can
Wow.
do it. And then I was like, okay, that's weird. Closed the laptop, and in the morning I opened it and had 9 responses. We
Wow.
got you. It's fine. We know we got there. It was exactly the same. And that was it. It was like literally that little torch in the,
Yes. And that's how it happens for
yeah,
everybody.
yeah, yeah. Connection is made, right? Connection is made. Yeah, thank you so much. So we always finish off
Thank
by
you.
just saying, what's your reason to, this is the cute thing because it's called Love Sober. What's your reason to love sober today?
Today, I'll just do today because
Yeah.
the reasons are too many. Today, well, waking up without a hangover it never gets old. And I am very far away from my daughter. She's in Portugal right now. I'm in Mexico. And I I love being sober today because I can feel connected to her
Mm.
and miss her. And she just turned 14 2 days ago, and love on her and feel all the complicated things that are being about being a mom,
Mm.
and it's okay, you know that that's what occurs to me right now.
Oh, that's
And I'm not
beautiful.
ashamed. I'm not scared. I'm not, I am safe in those feelings.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Laura. It's been amazing to talk to you.
You too.
Yeah,
This has
have a
been so
great.
great.
Oh, so if you're immediately concerned about your drinking, reach out, send up a flare. Lots of help online now. You can always send me an email at kate@lovesober.com. Laura's book is coming out, as we said, this week. And we'll put all the connection, your website and everything on the show notes, so you'll be able to find Laura and follow her by looking for those. And yeah, and we'll see you next week for more chat, and stay safe, everyone.